All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Women in Science and Engineering. Today we have a seminar with Virginia Barker from Brevard County Natural Resources. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the WiSE program before I let Virginia tell you more about Brevard County Natural Resources and being a manager. So the Women in Science and Engineering program at BCC is committed to the recruitment, retention, and advancement of underrepresented groups pursuing careers in science and engineering. WiSE is open to all students at BCC. We have seminar series like the one you are present at today, workshops on careers, resume building, and graduate schools, networking for future schools and future employment, local excursions, career mentoring, undergraduate research we started this semester. Virginia Barker is our last seminar speaker this semester. We have more seminar speakers coming on Tuesdays, the third Tuesday of each month, starting in the spring semester again. You can look at our website, www.brevardcc.edu/WiSE, for information on our upcoming speakers. We are now booked through the end of 2013 with speakers already. If you have any feedback you would like to give, suggestions, ideas that you would like to see Women in Science and Engineering do, please contact myself, Dr. Ashley Spring in the Science Department, or our Associate Provost, Dr. Mary Roslinowski, over in Building 1. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Virginia Barker.
Thank you. Okay, it's great to be here today. Can you see that, or is these lights? Am I just at a bad angle? Okay. And changing slides. I'll figure this out. All right. So as she said, I work for Brevard County's Natural Resources Management Office. I'm the Watershed Program Manager. The Watershed Program oversees basically two major functions: the county's beaches and dunes coastal management program, and our stormwater program, both flooding and water quality. And this was a groundbreaking ceremony, and I chose this picture because as women in science and engineering, you will mostly find yourself working adjacent to men. I was managing this beach project for the county. My counterpart with the Army Corps of Engineers was Osvaldo Rodriguez, and beaches is a field that is predominantly male, but there are a handful of women. I was asked today to talk about my accomplishments, the path that I took to get where I am, and any advice that I might have to pass along, and then talk about balancing career and family. And I added the last bullet there, community service. And I wanted to start by saying the path that I took is far from conventional. And so this photograph is me leading a trail of camels across the Rift Valley in Africa. This was the first little bit of science that I did after undergraduate. We were chasing camels across the Rift Valley, taking samples of the vegetation they ate, bagging that up and sending it to plant scientists in England who were trying to see whether the plants that grow in the Rift Valley would support the digestive systems of camels, because right now the herding tribes have primarily goats, and the goats rip up all the grass and low-lying vegetation from the roots, and that destabilizes the soil. The soil's eroding into the lake. Once the lakes fill up, there aren't fish for the people to eat. Fish are their primary source of protein. So the thought was, are there other kinds of animals that we could introduce to substitute for goats that would eat from the trees and not tear up the ground? And so the question was, would camels be able to survive in this landscape? And the only way to know was to get a bunch of camels and put them in the landscape and take samples of what they ate and do studies. So accomplishments, I don't think I've ever been asked what my accomplishments were before, and so I sort of stumbled around trying to figure out what kind of accomplishments. Certainly doing presentations like this, to me, is an accomplishment. Being asked to impart some sort of information to people means that I must know something somebody thinks might be valuable. I have publications. I scanned the covers of a handful of them in both the scientific literature as well as more popular things like Florida Trends. This is the first management plan that I wrote. I'm embarrassed to say it was 20 years ago, so I guess I'm not as young as I'd like to think. And then I have overseen a little over $120 million in construction projects for Brevard County. And in the course of that, I've picked up a few boards that are on the wall. So in addition to presentations like this, I've been asked to do a number of presentations. I just pulled a few from the last year or so. Last year, IECA is the International Erosion Control Association. They were having their international conference here in Orlando, and so they wanted to know about erosion in the state of Florida. And so they thought, well, what about beaches? And I was recommended as the person to come talk to their international group about erosion in Florida. So that was a really interesting crowd. People all over the world dealing with all sorts of different kinds of erosion, but interested to learn about how we manage things in Florida. Back this past spring, 2012, I was asked to present to a North American conference on transforming state fish and wildlife agencies to do more with less, of how to reach out to other partners to build. Basically, the wildlife agencies have been working under the same model for decades, and we're losing ground. We have more and more listed species, more and more rare species. Things are in decline, and so the current system is failing us. How do we make it better? And how do we make it better when we pretty well know we're not going to get significantly more funding for wildlife agencies? So we have to reach out, we have to build alliances with other groups that have some sort of similar interests. And we have done that here in Brevard County. And so I was one of two speakers chosen from across the country to come talk about what we've done here to build coalitions for sea turtles that has been successful. Last month, I was asked to present to the Coastal Engineering Research Board. This is a board made up of a general from the Army Corps of Engineers out of the Pentagon, plus 5 commanders from across the country for each of the different regions of Army Corps of Engineers. Their civil works program, they're looking at what should their research priorities be for the coming year. What are the impending problems to coastal engineering? What is it that they need to know that they should direct their scientific resources, their research folks on trying to answer? So I got to throw my 2 cents in there. I was the only local government representative invited to speak at that event. And just a week after that presentation, I was asked to speak to the Florida Shore and Beach Preservation Association about how to line up the timing for beach projects. Beach projects are enormously expensive. That's why I've overseen $120 million worth of projects. My first one was about $24 million. And so being from Brevard, from the Space Coast, use the example of liftoff and the T0, T-1 scenario, and ran everybody through. This is a group of the audience was made up of people like me who work for local governments all around the state of Florida, but were new to the program. And how is it that you coordinate the timing of getting your state matching funds and your federal matching funds with their different processes, and then getting your project on the ground? I know I'm not supposed to wander, but we can only build projects between nesting seasons on our beaches. So these blocks represent when turtles are on our beaches. We can't be pushing sand around during that time. And so we're left to these windows. So how do you line up all these state and federal processes so that you're ready to go when your little window of opportunity for construction finally gets here? All right, so enough about presentation. Talk about my odd path. I started out as, well, very undecided. I had no idea what I wanted my major to be, but you know, in high school, they make you take math every year, and so I just took math every semester, and I got to be a junior, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I started counting up my math credits, and I only needed one more class, and so I declared myself as a math major, not because I liked it, but, you know, it was just, I got to graduate with something. And then I took a marine biology class for the heck of it. I was taking, you know, one of everything for the heck of it, trying to find myself. And so in my the summer before my senior year, I decided to become a marine biology major. I was at Duke University, but they don't have a marine biology major. They have pre-med. So my senior year, I decided to suddenly take all of the pre-med courses required at Duke University. And so it took me an extra semester, but I ended up with a biology degree as well. And so then my dad was really excited. I finally graduated from Duke, woohoo, and he sent me out shopping with my mom to buy a couple new suits to go interview. And what do? But I take a job as a research conch diver. And all I needed to wear was a swimsuit, and all those expensive suits just hung in the closet. So I spent a little over a year and a half working in the Florida Keys for the state of Florida, researching conch populations, which the conch fishery had recently collapsed, and they had closed the fishery. And so we were researching the population, where there were still conch left and how they were reproducing, where the larval recruitment was coming from, and what we needed to do to try to recover conch in the state of Florida. I did that until it started to be winter again, and even though the Florida Keys is beautiful, balmy weather when you're on dry land, when you're underwater for 10 hours a day, it gets cold, and so I decided I also needed medical benefits. I needed a real job. The conch diving thing paid $6.45 an hour with no benefits. So the budget office was looking for somebody, and I had that math degree, so okay. I did that for 9 months, and it really wasn't very fun. And then my position was eliminated through budget cuts. So luckily, the same time that position was eliminated, President Bush, who loved to fish in the Florida Keys and saw the decline of the coral reef there, decided that the Florida Keys should be part of a marine sanctuary plan. And so he designated the Keys as a sanctuary, and he told his federal agencies, you have 2 years to write a management plan to protect Florida Keys. And so federal agencies came down from Washington and coordinated with state agencies to develop this plan, and the county, Monroe County, did not want to be left out. So they created a marine department of 2, and I was one of the 2, and I participated in the development of that sanctuary plan. From that first management plan that was a couple slides back, that was my contribution to the Florida Keys sanctuary plan. So I did that until that plan was completed, and then what was I going to do next? I mean, I still had a job, but that was really exciting. And once the plan was written, you know, now what? And so I talked to a bunch of people and said, well, you need to go back to school. So I went back and got a master's degree in coastal environmental management. I did my thesis work in Sri Lanka, off the coast of India, small, very poor country. They had designated their first marine sanctuary, and this is a picture of the kind of resources they have off their coast in their first marine sanctuary. But their people are so poor that to build buildings, they need cement. They can't afford to import cement from the mainland, and so they swim out, they break off pieces of coral, they bring them inland, they burn them, and they turn that ash into lye that's used to make cement. And so they were literally burning their coral reefs to, you know, build buildings. So my role, I worked for USAID, was to look at the value of that resource and to demonstrate the value of protecting that resource, what their country's economics was going to look like with that resource preserved versus without that resource. And it was a fascinating project, except for the little civil war that broke out while I was there, and somebody had a car bomb that they tried to, well, they did set off at the airport, so the airport was shut down for a couple months, and I was trapped there and couldn't get out, and there was curfew, and I had to walk back and forth to my office every day, past lots of people with rifles, and anyway, not the best part of that little summer jaunt. So after that, I got married and we moved here. My husband teaches at Florida Tech, and I needed a job locally, and so I just kept, looking at what was available. And the first thing that came up was Brevard County was working on their manatee protection plan. Well, I've written a few of these management plans, so I put my name in the hat, and I was hired part-time to work on the manatee protection plan. And we got that finished up and went through all the public hearings, and okay, it's adopted. So you have some extra time. Help this guy who is in charge of beaches. He's kind of overwhelmed. So I started helping out Mark Crosley, and shortly thereafter, he got another job and left after being with the county for 15 or 20 years, and I became a beach person, which was fine with me because it was a really fun job. I did this for a number of years on my own, and then I was promoted to supervisor over a whole section of wildlife and conservation-oriented folks. I was supervisor for a few years and then got promoted to director, which I didn't ask for. They just called me in one day and said, your director is going to be relocated and we want you to be his replacement. So I tried to explain that really wasn't what I wanted my career path to be, but they said, no, you're going to be good at it and we really need you, and just try it. So I tried it for 8 months. I didn't like the politics of it at all, and so after 6 months I said, this is not me. I pulled the office back together. I've done what you asked me to do, and can you please find somebody else? And so I actually got, I was asked to help find my replacement as director. I got to sit in on the interviews and help select my new boss, who's a great boss. And then I moved back to my supervisor position while I had a brand new baby, and so it was kind of nice to do something that I knew how to do. It was really easy, it wasn't challenging, not new challenges, while I tried to figure out how the heck to raise a child. And after a few years of that and get my feet on the ground with the whole child rearing thing, then the stormwater program, county stormwater program, merged with the natural resources office, and I ended up over the stormwater program plus still over beaches. So some more specifics, manatee plan uses a lot of GIS. So I just wanted to throw that in so you understand sort of the applications of GIS. We want to put boats that could harm manatees where manatees are least likely to be, and reduce the likelihood of putting boats, new marina facilities, where manatees like the best. And so that's really what the manatee plan is all about. Also in that plan, we talk about all the different kinds of outreach and education and research that needs to be done. And so we started implementing that plan with information at boat ramp. We collected a lot of data that showed that monofilament was a problem in our environment. Fishermen were, when their line got all tangled up, they would cut it off the reel and toss it over the side of the boat, and would get tangled around things in the environment and tangled around marine mammals and other critters in our environment. And so we knew we needed some sort of system for addressing monofilament. And one of my staff came up with the idea of creating these recycled bins. And how many people have seen these bins around at all the parks and at the beach? And right, okay, she invented this in her, well, I think most of it was in her garage. But so we worked together to develop that program, not just the bin design, but to come up with all the partners who is going to check the bins, volunteers to maintain the bins. Once you collect the monofilament, use monofilament, what do you do with it? So working with the tackle shop to box this stuff up, send it to the manufacturer, who then melts it and turns it into tackle boxes and resells it. And we came up with all of the design of stickers and literature and brochures, and then we got a grant to disseminate that program to the rest of the state of Florida. And we advertised this workshop to be held at SeaWorld for folks like us all around the state of Florida. And we were very surprised that people came from all over the country. And we were getting emails from around the world about this nice, clever, simple design. Anybody can build their little PVC bin, and here we have the stickers and the whole program. And so here are these people, tables and tables of them, building their first MERT bin. And I was just out in Wyoming, and, you know, there was a MERT bin in Yellowstone National Park. And so it's neat to be a part of something like that. I worked on the county's scrub jay conservation plan and identification of scrub jay habitat. We have more listed species here in Brevard County than any other place in the state of Florida, 103 listed species. And, you know, some of those are animals and some are plants. No one had bothered taking a sample of all those plants that we have here and creating an herbarium. So we got a grant. Suzanne Kennedy on my staff worked with volunteers mostly. The Native Plant Society was very helpful, building this herbarium that catalogs all the different kinds of plants that grow here. And if you need to ID them, we collected them during flowering, during seeding, so that you can have an example of what these look like. This is one of our endangered plants. It's endemic to the county. It doesn't grow anywhere else, the Dicerandra scrub. We did a lot of land management, acres of removing exotic invasive species. This is the Sierra wetlands, right? Okay, you know, it's treatment for the water treatment plant. And when the county first decided that they wanted to have a polishing wetland, the SUDA, right, was developing Sierra, and they wanted to make sure that that wetland wasn't going to be an eyesore and a smelly thing that was going to lower the value of their houses. They wanted it to be an amenity. So our office was brought in to work with a consultant to help design what would happen at the Sierra wetlands. How could we make this a natural amenity? And so I pulled together a team of people to look at what kinds of different plant communities could we put here that would bring in wildlife. And I designed islands in the various cells of these wetlands. We have differential water depths in the wetlands, and different plantings, different places, different habitat types to attract a diverse suite of wildlife. And of course, a few years ago, this site was added to the Florida Birding Trail because it's just such a spectacular site for wildlife, but especially birding. We also worked on, you know, we have coastal erosion, so what can we do to slow it down besides bulldozers and dredges and whatnot? And vegetation does, and natural vegetation does a great job in protecting our dunes. And so working on outreach to the public, especially the homeowners along the beach, to plant dunes, to not tread on the vegetation on their dunes, not rip out the vegetation on their dunes, you know, plant it, protect it, and it will protect the dune that will protect your upland structures. So a lot of my history here has been working on beach management, so I want to spend a little while on beaches. Right, Brevard County, back in the 1940s, leading up to that, we had an accreting shoreline. We had a shoreline that was gaining sand every year. You see the ridges forming as the land just built out, and this is curving out to the Cape Formation. And because we had an accreting shoreline, folks thought that this would be a great place to put an inlet. That was not such a great decision. There is an enormous net transport of sediment from north to south. And so when the jetties were put in here to stabilize this inlet, it blocked the flow of sand from north to south. And our beaches, Cocoa Beach south, well, Cape Canaveral south, started eroding. And they eroded for about 50 years until we were able to pull all the agencies together to reverse that process. A lot of people ask me, well, you know, if it was caused by the inlet, why don't we just close the inlet? No, no, no. The inlet is very important. It was important to development of our space program. That's how we actually get all those giant parts that are too big to go on the highway. They come in by boat. We have our Trident submarine basin in there. It's military important. Of course, now we have the cruise ship. It's a huge part of our economy. But what we gave up was the huge wide beaches where we used to have car races. And this picture from the 1920s is the Wright brothers landing their plane on our beaches because we had those nice, wide, hard, compact beaches that you could do that on before we put in the inlet. So what do we do about that? Well, a lot of people, very much smarter than I am, came up with the first major inlet management plan in the state of Florida. And I won't go through all the components here, but one of the big things is you've got to get the sand from the north side to the south side, and you've got to make up for 50 years of erosion by replacing some of the sand that's been lost. So my job was to replace the sand that's been lost. Well, where is that sand going to come from? Typically, you look for it offshore. You've got to find sandy shoals up there, that white feature at the top. But that sand has got to match our beaches. It's got to be the right color. It's got to be the right grain size. It's got to have the right composition of shell versus sand to match our environment. So you take Ponar grab samples, vibra cores. I was out on the rig collecting vibra cores. You pull up the cores and splice them and dice them and fill out a log sheet. The thing on the far right over there is color. Got to match the color because if the beach is darker, then the sand is going to be hotter, and that's going to cook turtle eggs. So, and the sand composition, the grain size has got to be the same distribution of grain so that you get the right oxygen exchange through the sand so that those eggs can breathe as those little turtles mature inside the egg. So measuring grain size. Now, this project, the initial beach construction, it was going to be the largest beach construction project that the Army Corps had ever built. And so the way that they normally did this was they normally had a hopper dredge suck up sand from the bottom of the ocean, from the Morrow area, once you identify your right source, and come to a hookup to a pump out station, and then you take all that sand that is now inside your ship, and you've got to resuspend it in a giant flurry of water to get it to pump out through a very long pipe onto the beach. And that's a very slow and expensive process. But that's how most beach renourishment is done. Coastal engineering consulting with us talked to industry about what other opportunities there might be, what other ideas there were. And they came up with the idea of developing a reef handling area, permitting an area where the hopper dredges could go offshore, collect the sand. This is a hopper dredge. And you can see this white space here. The hopper dredge is a split hull. And when it's collecting sand, the hull is together, solid, holding sand. But it has the capacity to do a bottom dump, to just pivot on giant hinges and dump its entire load very quickly and then race back and get the next load. So this is a much faster way to get sand close to the beach. And then there's a cutter head dredge that is very efficient at sitting in one place and sucking sand and sending it directly through a pipeline to the beach. The Army Corps, they were very skeptical because this meant you're going to have to not just mobilize one dredge, but mobilize two dredges. You know, was this going to be cost feasible? They didn't want to do it. And we said, well, you can write your plans and specifications to let the market decide. They can do it either way. Just put it in your plan so they are allowed to do it this way. And then whoever can do it the cheapest, they get the job. Doesn't cost you anything more. But if this is the cheapest way, then we learn. So sure enough, that was the methodology that the lowest bid contractor chose to use. And in fact, instead of mobilizing 2 dredges, they mobilized 3 dredges. So they had 2 hopper dredges going back and forth, refilling that rehandling area, and then 1 suction dredge planted there, moving sand to the beach. So one night, my cell phone rang. One of the first times my cell phone ever rang because I had just gotten a cell phone. It was the contractor saying, you know, this project is really going well. What would you say if I could mobilize a 4th dredge and we could finish a year ahead of schedule? Would you have the money to pay us this year instead of next year? And I said, well, I have the county's money and I have the state's money, but I don't have the federal dollars. And he said, well, can you get it? I said, I have no idea, but let me find out. So we planned an event on the dredge. We brought in, this was the colonel from the Army Corps, this is Congressman Weldon and his staff, show them, you know, this amazing thing that's going on here, and we are building this project faster and cheaper than has ever been done before, but we need more money now. So what is the process for getting more money now? And they laid out this process for me, which involved going to the Pentagon to meet with the Assistant Secretary of the Army and to meet with these House and Senate subcommittees to explain to them why we needed next year's money this year and how this is going to save them loads of money. And I got to do that, and it worked. Who knew? So pictures of, you know, big equipment, big toys, lots of fun. And so there we were, finished a year early and $700,000 under contract, and that doesn't count the several million that we saved because this contractor was so much cheaper than the next lowest bid. This was my first stormwater outfall experience. There were stormwater outfalls on the beach, and they caused erosion on the beach, and nobody wanted them there, but we couldn't figure out what to do about it because where else is the water going to go? If you pipe it the other way, it goes into the lagoon, and we're not allowed to get permits to put more dirty water in the lagoon. So we came up with this idea of putting this vertical riser into the sand with an open bottom with just filter cloth to let water percolate through the filter and sand, and hopefully you can see all these little holes, which I drilled in my driveway with one of those little doorknob things. Late in the night, my neighbor complained, but it had to be done because the pipe didn't arrive till that afternoon, and I had the whole work crew lined up for the next morning. And so anyway, this is at the end of Tampa Avenue, so you can see it, and it was very successful. And so now we're working on doing this to all of the stormwater outfalls up and down all 17 of them in Brevard County. So does this beach nourishment stuff work? Well, we had quite the test in 2004 with a number of hurricanes, Charlie, Francis, Jean, and this is what we look like after the storm. So this was one of our nourished beaches where we had just placed dredge sand in 2002, and so, you know, there's not a whole lot of dry beach left, but the crossover is still there at the end of the Indian-Atlantic Boardwalk. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the county, there were structural failure up and down, and you know, this is not good for the local economy. It's not good for tourism. It's not good for the people that live there. It's not good for turtles trying to nest. Where are they going to nest? So we were feeling pretty good about what we had done, but we only had these federal renourishment dredge projects along about 15, 14 miles of shoreline. We have another 20 miles of shoreline that did not qualify for federal shore protection projects for those sorts of reasons I won't go into. So for those beaches, we needed to do something, and we worked with FEMA to construct emergency berms. And this was, of course, the largest truck haul project ever built in the state of Florida, because who else has 20 miles of shoreline that they have to do this to, right? So truckloads of sand came from upland sources. We had to go through a similar process to getting the upland source sand to match our beaches, making sure it's going to be compatible. It came in trucks, piled in a giant pile. One bulldozer would scrape it up. The track hoe was loaded into off-road trucks. The off-road trucks would drive it down the beach and tip it in little piles along the beach, measured out, you know, by the teacup basically. And then another dozer was busy scraping it into the template, the approved permitted template. That's what it looks like when it's done. So, what do turtles think of our beach? Well, this one came up right, it was about an hour and a half before they were completely done with construction. The last night of the 4th year of constructing beaches along Brevard County. And the guys were so ready to be done and go home and have some R&R. And this turtle came up. So everything had to stop, right? All the equipment had to be turned off, all those diesel engines that rumbled the beach and all the lights, everything for 2 hours while this turtle nested right there in front of the bulldozer. And then when she was done, we raced out and got a few photographs and then worked with our turtle consultants to dig up that nest and relocate those eggs to a safe location so we could finish up our beach and finish our project. And you know, a month or two later, little hatchlings started coming out of the sand. So we were excited that once the turtles came, the eggs matured appropriately and thousands of hatchlings made it to the sea. But we did see that something about our beach discouraged turtles from nesting there in the first place. Usually, about half of the time when a female turtle comes up to nest, something isn't quite right. She turns around and goes back to the ocean. But on our Nourish project, about 2/3 of the time that turtles came up, that something wasn't quite right, and they turned around and went back to the ocean. So we wanted to try to figure out, you know, what that was. And we talked to lots of turtle experts, and we came up with some modifications to the standard design template. So instead of having a flat berm across the top, we have a very gradual slope that helps drain water off the top of the project and provide a little bit of lift. I mean, turtles are used to a natural beach that, you know, slopes off, not some giant black thing. And then we put this dune feature at the back to say, oh, you've reached the dune. It's time to nest now. Stop crawling. Because green turtles, they tend to just go and go until they hit a more vertical feature. So, you know, that's what it looks like in the design sheet. This is what it looks like on the ground. And for our truck haul project, much smaller template, right? This is what the agencies required originally, this 1-to-3 slope. Well, what happened when we built that was there was something about that slope. It was just perfect that they just kept walking. And they would walk right up between the houses and out to A1A. And so that was not good. So we were setting up silt fence, miles and miles of silt fence, trying to stop turtles from going out to the street. And we came up with this design instead, which has a lower slope to just give them that feel of gradual elevation. Yes, I'm getting up higher and higher from the ocean to something that's safe enough that my eggs aren't going to wash out. But then the steeper slope that is that backstop says, okay, I've gone far enough, I should stop now. And this graph shows you the 20-year record of what that nesting success rate was. And then this is what happened that first year with that slope. And this is what happened next year when Hurricane Wilma came and eroded all this. And we got to experiment all over again. So we did much better on the second try. And so now, that design is required by FEMA for all FEMA berms everywhere that has turtle nesting. We also learned that turtles, when you build a brand new beach, you elevate that beach, and so lights that were previously blocked by the dune are now visible to the turtles. And so we had to start a whole turtle lighting program to try to get people to understand that their lights were causing hatchlings usually orient to the moonlight and starlight reflecting off the ocean. That's how they know which way to go when they come up out of the sand. And instead, they were all walking towards all these lights in the building. So we've been helping people retrofit their lights, replace their lights, turn out their lights, shield their lights for like 10 years now. And we're making good progress. I feel guilty that I say I a lot because while I coordinated a lot of stuff, the ideas, the brilliance came from many, many other people. And this is one group, the Archie Carr National Wildlife Working Group. They've been meeting quarterly since inception of the Archie Carr 20 years ago. And you know, these people are just brilliant, and they're dedicated to helping turtles and preserving their habitat. And so when we collect this data and see that it's not quite right, I don't know how a turtle thinks. I don't know how to make it better, but I can go to this group and say, all right, y'all are the best turtle minds there are. What can we do? And get their advice on what to try, and rule out crazy ideas that we'll come up with a bunch of engineering ideas, but what's the right biological answer? So one of the stretches of beach that currently has a FEMA burn, but we would like it to have a big core engineered beach, our mid-reach section, Satellite Beach and Indian Harbor Beach. The reason there's not a big wide beach there is because there are rocks in the surf zone. Everybody stub their toe on the rock. These things are essential fish habitat, right? Our coral reefs, those coastal systems, they are the center of diversity for the ocean, right? They're the nursery grounds. They're where the food sources are. That's where most of life in the ocean is along these coastal resources. And so these things are amazingly important to our marine ecosystems, and we can't just bury them. So what do we do? In other beach projects around the state that did have impacts to coral reefs are more vertical structures. And so the way they mitigated for that was they built vertical-like structures out of giant boulders, 6-8 foot diameter, stacked up boulders that wouldn't roll around during a storm. Well, that wasn't going to properly mitigate for these tabular surfaces that were the habitat that we were going to bury. So we had to develop a different mitigation plan. We worked with a company out of Canada to come up with this marine mattress inlaid with natural coquina limestone mined from local pits. And we placed some of it out offshore in water depths where we proposed to build our mitigation, and tested recruitment. And this octopus was there on one of our first visits to see what was there. And it was just amazing to me. If you put it out there, they will come. What colonized to these things and how quickly they colonize. So we haven't built our renourishment project there yet. We haven't gotten to build these mitigation reefs, and we're planning to build 5 acres of them. So far, we just have this one little map. But we're looking forward to that in the next year or two, as soon as we can get all the federal and state and local dollars to fall into place. And one of the things we went through, I wanted this balance of science and engineering. There's a lot of economics to it too. So how do you optimize the benefits and reduce your costs? And so one of these things is mitigating the rock. Building those reefs is really expensive. So what is the right balance? Biologically, ecologically, financially, in terms of how much rock you bury, how much rock you preserve, how much rock you mitigate, how much beach do you build, wide beach, narrow beach. And so we went through an economic optimization process. So I just want you to have a feel for, at least in my experience, the role of science is very multidisciplinary. So I think one advantage I have is because I had no idea what I wanted to be when I was in college, and I took some of everything. I at least understand the language that all these different disciplines are speaking, and I can translate for different people and try to get them to understand a different perspective. So I encourage you to take advantage of those sorts of opportunities. All right, so most recently, my career has landed me over the county stormwater program, managing capital projects. And this is the 20-year history of the county stormwater program. This is when I became the program manager. And so I'm very proud of the fact that lots has been happening since I got there. And the funding stream has been absolutely level the entire 20 years. The fee has been $36 per person, and we have collected basically $3 million every single year from 1991 to present. So the difference in projects in the ground is getting grants, putting together partnerships, and just making it happen. And you know, coordinating people. So I want to talk about water quality, right? I came into stormwater thinking, oh, it's, you know, it's bulldozers, it's moving dirt, moving water. I've been doing that for a while. And I actually proposed that I just take the capital side, the flood improvement side, and my director, whom I respect so much, said, oh yeah, you can have that, but you're going to get the water quality side too. I'm like, oh, you don't know what my grades were back in water chemistry. But of course, water quality is incredibly important to the Indian River Lagoon and also the St. Johns River, and we've got these balloons going on now, seagrass die-off. So trying to get my head around what is the problem and what are the solutions. So loads of very smart people worked extremely hard to try to understand what was going on in the lagoon, and they built models and they compared data sets, and they came up with the total nutrient, nitrogen, and phosphorus loads that they thought the lagoon could handle in different segments for seagrass to grow and be healthy and thrive. And seagrass is obviously a habitat for fish and cephalopods and everything else that's out there. So these are the percent reduction for total nitrogen and total phosphorus that those total max of it, that science was adopted in state rule and by the EPA, and we are supposed to somehow clean up our stormwater such that we will reduce the load outflowing to the lagoon by these percentages in these different segments of the lagoon. So I color-coded this so to try to help you, and I don't know whether you can tell the difference between this sort of putrid yellow versus this semi-orangey peach, whatever color, but the yellow ones are all the central lagoon, so from the 192 causeway south. And you'll see that they, by and large, have the largest reductions required. The peach ones are the Banana River, and they have some very large reductions. And then these ones down here are the north end of the lagoon, so from Volusia County to the Melbourne Causeway, roughly. And so you'll see that these have the lowest required reduction. Well, all these science, all the data analysis was done back in the 90s based on data collected up through 99. Final analysis was done in 2003. It was published in 04, 05, 06. Rules were adopted in 07 and 09. Well, by the time we were told you need to reduce your nitrogen load by so many pounds in this segment of the lagoon, another decade had gone by. And these are the years that seagrass data was collected after all that initial study was done. And so when you look at what does that seagrass data tell us, because I went through all the modeling that was done and I questioned some of the assumptions. I was worried that parts of it weren't right, but you know, who am I to question these people that spent their life doing it? When I looked at what has the seagrass done since then, these green boxes with the X's, these are the areas where seagrass has met the target. The places and the years where seagrass is growing at the depth where the agencies thought seagrass needed to grow in order for the lagoon to be healthy. Well, those are the areas where they said we had the most reductions to do. We haven't even gotten started on reductions. These areas where we have the least amount of reductions to do, the seagrass isn't performing at all. So something's messed up. And we also calculated what it was going to cost to comply with these regulations. For Volusia, Brevard, Indian River, and all the cities amongst us, our cost estimate to comply was $1.3 billion. I don't know where we're going to come up with $1.3 billion. I know I can't afford taxes anywhere close to that. But if we're going to spend on that order of magnitude to clean up water quality in the lagoon, it better be the right plan. We better be cleaning up the right stuff in the right place. I don't want to spend $1.3 billion doing more of this, where seagrass is recovering, and doing less here, so we got to get it right. So we looked at, well, what has this load, right? It's the nitrogen and phosphorus load that is supposedly the problem for seagrass. Well, what has nitrogen been doing over the period of record over the last 15 years? It's been trending down. What about phosphorus? Trending down. What about chlorophyll? Trending down up until the end down there. So how is nutrient loading the problem? Something doesn't add up. So I tried to talk to the agencies, and I tried to do some research, and I drove to Tallahassee, and I met with the state bureau chief over the water quality program, and I said, I really think you guys need to step back and look at the science again, add in this additional 10 years of data, and redo your models and see if you get the same thing, because I'm worried we're headed in the wrong direction. And they said, oh, we've got a consent decree, there's lawsuits, EPA's on our backs, we got to get this thing done, we can't stop now, we got to adopt plans, don't worry that it might not be right, we just got to adopt something. Really? And so they said, but if you want to do it, we'll listen. Like, I don't want to do it. I don't know this stuff. You're the agency. You need to do it. We can't do it. We don't have time. So I came back and pulled together a day, a workshop, invited all the city counterparts like myself, and went through what I had pulled together. I picked things where I thought the previous modeling was weak. I found experts in those items. I asked them if they would come please talk to us. They did. They came for free. They came and talked to us. Everybody understands the value of the inner lagoon. They want to get it right. And so we had this day of just educating ourselves, getting the best and brightest to tell us what they thought we needed to know. And the city said, you're right. We have to do a study. We have to get the science right. If the agencies won't do it, we'll have to fund it ourselves. We can't be spending $1.3 billion on the wrong thing. So somehow I got pushed forward. You will lead this consortium, and you will do this study, and we'll try to get it right. And so every single city, regardless of how cash-strapped we've been over the last 5 years with budget cuts, signed voluntarily, we will cost share based on population. And we agreed on an expert team, right? I don't know it. I'm not going to know it. What I can do is research who does know it and pull them together. And so, we got the guy who worked on what is the concentration of nitrogen and phosphorus in runoff for developing the statewide stormwater rule. So the state thought he was the guy. All right, we'll take him. Who has ever changed the state and federal government's mind on a water body before? This guy. Working with this guy, right? And so we pulled this team together and said, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to, is that all the pieces, parts? Oh, no, we need this other. Okay, who's going to do that? Yep, okay, bring him in. And we've had this team working for about a year. We have their approach document right now. I am desperately trying to schedule a meeting with the agencies to get them to buy off on the modeling process, the approach, because I don't want to crank out final numbers until we bought into the scientific approach and the assumptions. Are we on the right track? Are we all going to agree that whatever number spits out is a better number than the number we had before? Right? So the purpose of this study is to not only to get it right, but to be sure that we're on the right path, that we're going to collect all these dollars from the public and spend it on projects that we're going to see results. We've got to feel confident that if we do this, we're going to see improvement in the lagoon. One of the first things that we found was that when you look at the volume of water coming out of the tributaries, you tease apart wet season and dry season. Right? During the wet season, you expect lots of volume to be running off, right? All that rain's got to go somewhere. But during the dry season, between the rain events, where is all that water coming from that's coming down the tributaries? There are enormous flows coming down our tributaries. That water is coming from the groundwater. It's base flow. This is our base flow volume. This is the overland runoff volume. So all of those rules are assuming that we can get the nutrient load reductions that we need from this storm water. But the load, the majority of the load is up here. If you add up all the load in stormwater, it does not equal the reductions they said are necessary to save the lagoon. So if we continue to concentrate on this, we will never get there no matter how much money we spend. So what is contaminating our groundwater, and how are we going to stop that? I think a big answer is fertilizer, but that's just a hunch. We'll let the scientists figure it out. So I've been asked to give a talk to the American Society of Civil Engineers on you're bucking the system. How is that working? What are you doing? And there's another person, Kimberly Lawrence, my co-presenter. She's doing a similar thing over in Seminole County. And Tampa Bay has also done this sort of thing. Don't just accept what people are telling you. If it doesn't make sense, we've got to get it right. So one of the things that we're doing to try to combat fertilizer especially, but all the ways that we are polluting not just our stormwater, but also our groundwater, is developing this Live Blue outreach program. Let me see if I can get to, so we created 2 videos. This is gonna. So I went to Blue Man Group and I pitched this idea, and I had their marketing person all excited about it. But the Blue Man Group in New York had already done an environmental outreach piece, and they'd had a bad experience with it. So the corporate Blue Man whatever said no to the Florida group. And so we had to do something a little different. So that's our first video. We've got a second one on dog waste. We're trying to do a third one on car care. We're just trying to make our way down the list of what it is that we do in our everyday lives that is actually polluting the lagoon, and how we can do a better job of protecting the lagoon instead of spending $1.3 billion on potentially the wrong thing. So closing advice, don't feel like you got to figure out everything right now. Life will throw all kind of curveballs at you, and don't settle early. Just just keep looking. You will find something that works for you. Find, if you can, find good supervisors. Find people that support your strengths, that, you know, recognize what you're bringing to the table, that don't shush you, you know, that want to hear your ideas and help you grow and become a better person. Find workspace, you know, interview the other people that work there. Make sure they're happy, because you're going to be there 8 hours a day. You want it to be a happy, healthy place. Seek mentors. Mentors can help you just leap forward and, you know, pick a specific item, find a person who really knows that issue, and ask for their guidance. People are usually happy to help growing minds, and that is really, really helpful. Then, you know, why bother with mediocre, right? Are you going to be proud of mediocre when you look back on life? Forget that. Exceed expectations. You know, pick what you like and then do it incredibly well. And when you do that, people will look to you for advice. They will respect your opinion, and you will be able to lead from wherever you are in the organization. I don't need to be the director with all that political nonsense, because I paint the vision and people say, yes, that's where we want to go. And we go there. So you don't necessarily have to be at the top to lead. Lead from wherever you are. I was asked to talk about balancing career and family. Our rule is family is always first. Whenever you have a question, family is first. I would recommend, if you can possibly figure it out, try to plan your home and your job close to each other so you don't spend your life commuting. Because as soon as you get a spouse and kids and they're going to school and they're in soccer and they're this and they're that, you're going to spend your whole life driving all over everywhere, and it's going to drive you bonkers and eat up your life. So try to minimize that up front if you possibly can. Make work fun. There's my poor daughter on vacation in the Florida Keys, right? We can figure out how to tie all this together somehow. Let's go see the stormwater drains in the Florida Keys. Look, if we jump in this one on the incoming tides, we can shoot through the wreckage. Stormwater, it's fun, really. And then about this balancing thing, ask someone else, because I really suck at it. All right, my last pitch is community involvement. It means so much to give back. You get so much out of life if you give back. So for me, originally it was the Girl Scouts. Then Operation Raleigh was the program that I did, chasing camels and across Africa, and then building medical dispensaries and schools, and a park ranger station, fencing in a rhino area. When we moved here, I volunteered for 2 years for Palm Bay Water Guard, sampling in the Indian River Lagoon. I've served on the Archie Carr Working Group now for 15 years. The Florida Shore and Beach Preservation Association, I've been on their board for many years. I've been the chair twice now. Space Coast Climate Change Initiative, I'm on their steering committee. Brevard Nature Alliance, I've been their treasurer for a number of years now. And recently I've been named to the Florida Stormwater Association Board of Directors. So there are just numerous ways to give back. And I get something out of all of these groups that I work to support. So I encourage you to find your niche and reach out and grow yourself and your community. So thank you very much for your time. And I'm sorry I started late and went long.
Thank you for coming to the WiSE seminar. If you have any questions, please come on up to the stage and ask Virginia Mercer directly.